Every name on the oldest list in the Bible ends with the same 3 words. Adam lived, and he died. Seth lived, and he died. Enoch, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, 900 years each, and after every one of them the account closes the same way. And he died. Except once. 7th from Adam, there is a name where those words are missing. The sentence stops in the wrong place. It says he walked with God, and then it says he was not, because God took him. No grave, no burial, no body. He was 365 years old, which in that generation was barely middle age, and he is the only man in the entire account who leaves the world alive. Where did he go, and what did he see when he arrived? This is the story of Enoch, the man who walked with God and never died. To understand why one man was carried out of the world, you have to understand what the world had become. Enoch was born in the 7th generation after Adam. That sounds like a long time. It was not. Men lived 900 years in those days, and their lives overlapped like roof tiles laid on a house. Adam was still alive when Enoch was born. The first man was still walking the earth, very old by then, and he could still describe the garden from memory. There were people alive who had heard it from him directly. What the light had been like, what the voice had sounded like, what it felt like to be sent out and hear the gate close behind you. And they were forgetting it anyway. Down on the river plains, the sons of Cain had built the first cities, and the cities were working. There was metal now. There were walls and towers and a gate that could be shut against your neighbor. There was music, and there were forges, and there were men whose entire trade was making one object that had no purpose except to end another man. None of that had come from below. 200 beings had come down onto the shoulder of a mountain in the north, in the days of Jared, Enoch's own father, and they had taken wives among the daughters of men, and then they had done the thing that could not be taken back. They taught. Azazel taught the making of swords, and knives, and shields, and breastplates, and then he taught the women what to put on their eyes and their skin, so that the men who owned those swords would want them. Others taught the cutting of roots, and the binding of spells, and the reading of the clouds, and the courses of the moon, and the signs of the earth, and one of them taught the making of ink and paper, so that from that day a lie could outlive the man who told it. And the wives of the watchers bore children. The children were not children. They came up out of infancy at a speed that broke every household that fed them, and they kept coming up, past the height of a tall man, past the height of 2, until a village could not fill them, and stopped trying. They ate the harvest, and then they ate the herds, and then they ate the people, and when there was nothing left with meat on it, they began to eat one another. That is the world Enoch was born into. Not a primitive world. A world that had been handed too much too early by teachers who had no right to be teaching, and was now being eaten by what it had produced. And the earth itself began to make a sound. The old writings are very specific about this. They say the earth cried out. Not the people on it. The ground. The dust that had been shaped into a man once was making a complaint that reached all the way up. And it was heard. Into that world a boy was born to a man named Jared, and his name meant dedicated. Genesis gives him 4 verses. It is one of the shortest entries in the whole genealogy, and it is the only one that does not end in a grave. The account says that Enoch lived 65 years and fathered Methuselah. Then it says something it says about no one else on the list. And Enoch walked with God. Read that phrase slowly, because it is stranger in the original than it sounds in English. It is not a verb of visiting. It is not a verb of praying. It is the ordinary word for going about on foot, the word you would use for two men crossing a field together, and it is written in a form that means it kept happening. Not he met with God. Not he sought God. He walked with him continuously for 300 years. In the entire Hebrew Bible, that phrase is used of exactly two men, Enoch, and later, his own great-grandson, in a boat. So picture the ordinary version of it, because the ordinary version is the point. A man in an undyed wool robe leaves a house before the sun is up. He walks out past the last of the barley into the open country, and he is not alone, and he is not afraid, and nothing about his face suggests that anything unusual is happening. He does this for 300 years. And while he walks, he writes. This is the part that gets left out. Enoch was a scribe. The old books say he was the first among the sons of men who learned writing and knowledge and wisdom, and that he wrote down the signs of the sky and the order of the months, so that men would know the seasons of the years. He carried a reed pen and a folded sheet, and he wrote things down. That is who he was before anything else happened to him. Not a prophet with a burning face. A man who kept records. Which is exactly why they came to him. The Watchers had been on the earth for a long time by then, and something had changed in them. At the beginning, they had been proud of what they made. They had walked into human villages with their light barely hidden and been received like gods, because that is what they looked like. But their children had turned. The giants did not obey their fathers. They obeyed hunger. And the fathers, who had never lacked anything in their existence, discovered the thing that every parent eventually learns, which is that you cannot unmake what you have made. And above them, the sky had gone quiet. That is the detail the writings keep returning to. It was not thunder that frightened them. It was silence. They had been able to speak upward their whole existence in the way you can speak to someone in the same room, and now when they tried, nothing came back. So they went looking for a man. They knew who he was. They had watched him for 2 centuries, walking out before dawn with a pen in his belt, the one human being on the earth who did not run from them and did not worship them. The account says they came to him and asked him to write a petition. Understand what is being described. Beings that had stood in the light of the throne, that had been made before the world was finished, that had taught mankind the metal in its own hands, came to a man of about 300 years old in a field and asked him to speak for them. Write for us, one of them said. Enoch asked them the only sensible question, why me? And the answer they gave him is the most human thing in the entire book. We cannot lift our faces to him, they said. They could not speak. Not, would not. Could not. Something in them had closed, the way a throat closes, and the beings who had once heard the voice that made the world now needed a creature made of dust to carry a message 4 days' walk up a mountain. And Enoch said no. That is in the writings, and it is worth sitting with. He did not want it. He had a wife. He had a son. He had a life of walking out at dawn and coming back at dark, and he understood immediately that if he agreed to this, that life was over. He told them he was a man who wrote down the movements of the moon. He was not a judge. He had no standing to carry anyone's case anywhere. They did not argue with him. They just stayed. The account says they were weeping, and that they could not speak because of their weeping, and that they stood in front of him and did not leave. and eventually he sat down and took out the pen. He wrote the petition himself, their words, his hand, a request for forgiveness and for length of days, written by the only species that had ever been offered either. Then he took it and walked south to the waters of Dan, southwest of the great mountain, and he sat down by the running water and read the petition aloud until he fell asleep. And the visions fell on him. He would say later that he saw clouds coming toward him, and mist calling him, and the courses of the stars, and the flashes of lightning hurrying him along, and winds in the vision that lifted him and carried him upward. He was brought into heaven, and the first thing he saw was a wall. A wall built of hailstones, with tongues of fire moving up and down it, and he went in through it, because in a dream you go in. Inside was a house. The floor was made of crystal. The ceiling was made of moving stars and lightning. Between them were fiery beings of a kind he had no word for. And the house was hot as fire and cold as ice at the same time, and there was nothing in it. No life, no comfort, nothing to sit on. He said fear covered him, and trembling took hold of him, and he fell on his face. Then he looked up, and there was a second house, larger than the first, standing open. The whole of it was built of fire. The floor was fire. The walls were fire. And there was no way to describe it, he said, in terms of glory or honor or size. Inside it there was a throne, and the throne looked like crystal, and its wheels were like the shining sun, and beneath it he could hear voices. And on the throne sat the great Glory, and his robe was brighter than the sun, and whiter than any snow. No angel could enter that house and look at his face. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and not one of them went in, and none of them needed to be told not to. And a man from a field near the river Dan was standing in the doorway with a folded petition in his hand. He said he kept his face down and his whole body shook. Then the voice called him. "Come here, Enoch," it said, "and hear my word." One of the holy ones came and lifted him and brought him to the door, and he stood there with his face turned to the ground, and the answer came. The answer was not a debate, and it did not begin with the watchers. It began with him. "Fear not, Enoch," the voice said, "righteous man and scribe of righteousness." He was given a title before he was given an assignment, and the title was the job he already had. He was a man who wrote things down accurately, and that, apparently, was the qualification. Then came the message he had to carry back, and it opened with a sentence that turns the whole errand upside down. "Go and say to the watchers of heaven, who have sent you to intercede for them, you should be interceding for men and not men for you." That is the hinge of the entire story. The order of creation had been reversed. Beings made to guard humanity were now hiding behind it, and the reversal itself was part of the verdict. Then the sentence, and it is worse than destruction. They had left the high and holy and eternal heaven, and they had defiled themselves with women, and done as the children of earth do, and taken wives for themselves. "Spirits do not need children," the voice said, "because spirits do not die. That is why heaven was never given wives. Not as a rule imposed on them, but as a fact about what they were. They had been given eternity instead of descendants, and they had traded it." And now the sentence. "Their children, the giants, would be destroyed, not by an army, by each other. They would be set against one another until the earth was clean of them, and their fathers would watch it happen and would be able to do nothing. They would see the death of their beloved ones. They would have no peace. There would be no petition accepted for them, no mercy asked and granted, no length of days, not though they wept and begged for 10,000 years. And they would not be killed. That is the part people miss. Nothing in this account gets deleted. They would be bound in the valleys of the earth, under rough stones, in darkness, until the day of the great judgment, and the writings put a number on the waiting. 70 generations. Enoch carried that back down the mountain, and he read it out to them. The account says that when he had finished, they were terrified, and trembling took hold of them, and they covered their faces. 200 beings that had stood in the light of the throne stood in a field in front of a man 300 and some years old, with their hands over their faces, and none of them said anything. There was nothing to say. They had asked a man to speak for them, and the answer had come back in his handwriting. Before Enoch is shown the rest of it, one thing. If this is the kind of story you were never told in church, subscribe. There is a new biblical film on this channel every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Now, back to a man who had just carried a verdict down a mountain and was about to be shown the machinery behind the world. But that was not the end of it. Because heaven did not bring a man that far only to have him deliver a verdict. Having got him there, they showed him the rest. What follows in the old books is the strangest travel account ever written, and it reads like a survey. He is handed off to an angel, usually Uriel, and taken from place to place, and at every stop he asks a question and gets a technical answer. He is shown the storehouses. Not a metaphor. Chambers, with the wind kept in them, and the hail, and the mist, and the dew, and the frost, and gates in the sky, through which each one is let out at its appointed time. He watched the mechanism that makes weather, and he wrote down the arrangement of it. He is shown the courses of the sun and the moon, and this is where the account becomes genuinely peculiar because it turns into a calendar. 12 gates on the eastern horizon and 12 on the western, the sun rising in a different one each month and setting opposite it, the moon losing and gaining its light in a fixed order, a year of exactly 364 days in 4 seasons of 91. The first man who learned to write came back from heaven with an almanac. Then he is taken to the mountain of the dead. A great mountain of hard rock, and inside it 4 hollow places, deep and wide, and very smooth, 3 of them dark, and 1 of them lit, with a spring of bright water in the middle of it. He asked why the hollows were smooth and deep and dark, and the angel told him they were made so the spirits of the dead could be gathered there, all the souls of the children of men, and held separately until the day of judgment. Separated by what, he asked. By what they had done, and by whether anyone had answered for them, the righteous in the place with the water, the sinners in the dark, and 1 hollow kept apart for those who had been killed, whose case was still open, whose complaint was still being made. He is shown the tree. At the ends of the earth, on a mountain of 7 mountains, a tree unlike anything growing on the ground, with fragrance in its leaves and fruit like clusters of dates, and it was not for the living. It was being kept. Its fruit would be given to the elect after the judgment, and the angel told him plainly that no one had permission to touch it until then. And then he is taken to the place that broke him. He was carried to where there was nothing, no sky above and no ground beneath, no water, no birds, no order of any kind, a void, and in it 7 stars burning like great mountains on fire, rolling in the emptiness. He asked what sin the stars had committed. And the angel told him they were the stars that had not come out at their appointed time. They had disobeyed the order given at the beginning, and this was the place of their imprisonment. And they would be held there for 10,000 years. 10,000 years for arriving late. Then they took him a little further and showed him a worse place and told him that this second one was for the angels. He wrote it all down. Every measurement, every gate, every name, every number. He had been sent up to carry one message, and he came back down with a description of the machinery behind the world. And then he came home. That is the detail that makes the whole account feel real. He came back. He walked into a house that had a wife in it and a son who was now grown, and he sat down at a table with a stack of writing that could not be explained to anyone. His son was named Methuselah, and Methuselah is the man who receives all of it. The account is written as a father speaking to one son, not to a nation, not to a council, to one man at close range with instructions. "Keep these," he told him. And then he told him who they were for, and this is the strangest instruction in the book. They were not for that generation. They were not for the people alive at the time, who were the ones with giants in the hills and watchers in the valleys and an actual problem. They were for a remote generation, a long way off, one that would be alive in the last days. Enoch was told that the world he was standing in would not be the one that read his books, and he wrote them anyway and handed them to his son and told him to pass them down. He also told him what was coming. Water. All of it. Over all of it. He said the earth would be cleaned of what was on it, and that everything would be destroyed, and that one house would be left. And then, in one of the oldest fragments we have, that prophecy gets tested. Methuselah's son Lamech had a child, and the child was wrong. The skin was white as snow and red as a rose. The hair was white as wool. And when the baby opened its eyes, the writings say the whole house lit up. Then the infant stood up in the hands of the midwife, opened its mouth, and spoke to the Lord of righteousness. Lamech ran. He went to his father Methuselah and said the thing that every man in that generation was afraid to say out loud. "This child is not mine," he said. "This one belongs to the angels." He was not being cruel. He was being reasonable. Everyone knew what happened when a watcher took a wife. Everyone had seen the results walking around in the hills. So Methuselah did the only thing he could do. He went to find his father. The old man had been gone from human company for a long time by then, out at the ends of the earth where the angels were, and Methuselah walked until he found him, and told him what had been born. Enoch's answer came back with no hesitation at all. "The child is your son's," he said, truly and not falsely. And then he told him the rest of it. There would be a flood and a great destruction, and it would come in the lifetime of the boy that had just been born. The earth would be cleansed of all corruption, and this child and his 3 sons would be saved out of it. "Call him Noah," he said, "because he will comfort the earth after all the destruction." That is the last message Enoch is recorded as sending to the world. Not a curse, a name for a baby, and an instruction not to be afraid of it. And then it happened. The account of his own end is 4 words long, and it is the flattest sentence in the Bible. And he was not. The whole line reads, "And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. 365 years, no illness, no last words on record, no body. The verb in the original is the ordinary one for taking something, reaching out and receiving it, the same word used for taking a wife or taking a tool off a shelf. There is nothing dramatic in it at all. Which means the picture in the text is not a chariot and it is not a storm. It is simpler and much stranger than that. A man went out walking in the morning, the way he had done every morning for 3 centuries, and at some point in that walk, the distance between the two of them closed, and he did not come back. Try to imagine the house. The sun goes down, and he is not there. It goes down again the next day. Methuselah goes out looking, because that is what a son does, and there is nothing to find. No robe on the ground, no staff, no marks. They could not bury him. In a culture that was built around burial, around the cave and the stone and the gathering of a man to his fathers, there was nothing to put in the ground. And they knew what had happened. That is the part the account is careful about. There is no confusion in it, no search party that goes on for years, no rumors. The writing is calm. God took him. The New Testament, thousands of years later, describes it in one line. By faith Enoch was taken, so that he would not see death, and he was not found, because God had taken him. Not that he escaped death, that he never saw it. There is a difference, and the text keeps it. Meanwhile, the world he had been lifted out of went on exactly as he had written it would. The giants tore each other apart in the hills. The watchers were bound in the valleys under rough stones, in the dark, exactly as the sentence had said. Azazel was thrown into a pit in the desert of Dudael, with jagged rocks piled over him, and his face covered so he would see no light. And the water came. Methuselah lived 969 years, longer than any man before or since, and he died in the year the flood began. His grandson Noah went into a boat with his family and his animals, and the earth was cleaned. Every city gone, every forge gone, every tower and wall and gate on the river plains gone. The entire world that had been taught the sword and the paint and the roots and the stars was scraped off the ground and buried in mud. And one thing came through. The writing. The books survived because Enoch had handed them to a son, and that son had handed them down, and the family that carried them was the family that got on the boat. That is the callback the whole story is built on, and it is easy to miss. The Watchers taught mankind ink and paper, and that gift was listed as a crime because it let a lie outlive the man who told it. And the answer to that crime was a man with a reed pen, writing down what he had actually seen, so that the truth could outlive him too. The same tool, used the other way. His books were read for a very long time. They were quoted and copied and carried, and they were serious literature to the people who wrote the New Testament. Jude quotes him by name and by position in the family line. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied. And then they were dropped. They are not in the Protestant canon, and they are not in the Catholic one. They survived in Ethiopia, in a church that never let them go, and for around 1,000 years most of the world had no access to them at all. The book that says it was written for a remote generation spent a millennium out of reach and then came back. There are only 2 men in the entire Bible who do not die: Enoch, before the flood, and Elijah, taken up in a whirlwind thousands of years later. 2 out of every one. And here is the thing about the first one. Almost everything anyone thinks they know about the world before the flood comes through his hand. The names of the 200, what each of them taught, the height of the giants, the sentence, and the 70 generations, and the spirits that came out of the dead giants and never left the earth. None of that is in Genesis. Genesis gives it 6 verses and moves on. It is in the writing of a man who was taken out of the world before it ended, specifically so that there would be someone left who could describe it. He walked out one morning and did not come back, and he left the record on the table. And people are still arguing about what is in it. The world Enoch was taken out of has its own story. It is the next film on this channel, and it is waiting for you now. If you want to know what the Earth actually looked like in the last century before the water came, what was built on it, and what was living on it, subscribe, and I will see you there.